Okay, here's number four. This is the meaty, juicy you've been wanting to get to. So
Oh
number
yeah.
four, again, according to the UNWTO, the fourth characteristic is ecotourism. It minimizes negative impacts upon the natural and socio-cultural environment. So there you go.
Yeah,
Big T-ball served up. Minimizes negative impacts. In other words,
well,
91% of divers crashing into the reef, it is not ecotourism. Even if you're
well,
observing, you like it. Well, if you crash into the goddamn reef, that's not minimizing your negative impact.
so we already kind of talked about the sociocultural and socioeconomic part of tourism and the Americanization of all these remote locations.
I'm
But
just
the
realizing as I pound a monster during this whole thing. This episode sponsored by. Don't worry, I will recycle this can. Sponsored by Monster. Sorry.
no, you're good. I can't remember the last time I had an energy drink.
I have
I
such a
drink a
love
lot of
hate.
coffee though, and I
Yeah,
know that's probably not good for the environment either. The amount of
yeah. See,
coffee.
this is that episode where it's like, yeah, but look at the clothes you're wearing, Jay. Look at that. It's like we're not trying to point fingers, but I know fingers will be pointed back, so it'll be what it'll be.
It is what it is. Anyway, well, we already talked about the Americanization and the cultural aspects that come with the tourism industry, but the natural impact on Mother Nature, that is something that I think is and probably always will be a hot topic for scuba divers, and especially when you get to divers at a higher level, basically from advanced all the way up to full DPV CCR cave explorers, is what are we doing as an industry to Mother Nature?
Yeah, to minimize our impact. Yeah,
and it's not pretty.
yeah. And I think for me, like you said, the negative impacts upon the natural environment, a reef, for example, that we've been talking about, I think are coming from. I think what did you use the word? Ignorant, good meaning ignorance. Yeah, good. I don't think anyone like jumps off the dive boat and goes like, well, I'm gonna crash into the reef today. Like that's my job. Like, yeah, here we go. Woohoo. I mean, maybe there's
Well,
those
I
people.
mean, you look at some people and you think maybe that is what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that's true. I would say the majority don't jump off the boat thinking that or get in the water, but it happens. So your stats, 80% being generous there, it happens. Why? And this is where you go back to like, where does the onus lie? And you specifically mentioned the biggest culprit of contact with the reef in this particular study was fins. And one, I'm going to give an excuse as to why, and then I will knock that down. So one, I think your perception of yourself with fins on, your body perception in the water, you've grown by like a foot at least, depending on the fins you're wearing. Some people have grown by 3 feet, right, with the fins. And so your perception of where your body ends, especially because you can't see that end of your body typically on your fins, makes it challenging to then understand like when I'm clear of something, or whatever. So there's kind of, I think, a reason that would be the case for sure, and that doesn't matter which type of propulsion technique you're using. The bigger thing I think is that, and I've talked to a lot of big box instructors about this particularly, because I ask, why don't you teach other types of propulsion? And the answer I typically get back is because I would love to, but it takes too long, and I only have this amount of time to get them certified. And it kind of goes back to this idea of, have we sped up training to be too easy and too fast to make it less scary for the masses, and less skills oriented? And the cost of that is 91% of people crashing into the reef with their fins, because there are better ways of propulsion under the water that do take a little bit more time to learn. But something like a frog kick, right? A balanced, nice frog kick. is going to be so much more efficient for the diver and give the diver so much more control than what we typically see, which is this, really exaggerated, flutter kick, or some people call it the bicycle kick, or whatever you might call it. That inherently, by the nature of that kick, is going to affect the environment that it's in, unless we're 10 feet above it in some ways. Because you look at just where the fin pushes the water and where that water column ends up hitting, it's going to hit something, right? Instead of it being directly above you in the water column. And so this comes back to, how do we minimize our negative impacts? I think it comes back to looking at diving as not just a tourist activity where we jump in the water and what happens, and we come back up in great dive, even though 80% of us crashed into the reef and we, 17% of us broke coral. Well, guess how many dive boats went out that day? Guess how many times that's repeated? Guess how long that coral is going to be there, right? So on and so forth. Instead, it's saying, how do we minimize it by looking at diving as a skill set, not just an equipment configuration. And that's where I see the biggest gap in big box scuba. Is we talk about diving and scuba diving as such a equipment centered thing, how to work the equipment, and that all we're talking about is the scuba part of scuba diving. We very rarely focus on the diver and the diver's skill. And diving in a minimalistically negative impact format requires some level of skill. And it's not just your get advanced and get this and perfect whatever buoyancy classes. It's setting that expectation from the start, because your normal open water diver is then certified to go jump on in that reef. And so I think there is an onus on the training aspect to bring a bigger emphasis on the skill that's required behind diving. And I'm not saying every diver in an open water class needs to master a helicopter kick, right? Or master a back kick before they can get certified. What I am saying is, can we actually measure a non-impactful, I won't even say non-silting, because that's maybe too high of a bar, but non-impactful propulsion? Can we check that off the box? Can we check it off the box that they can descend without crashing into the bottom, or perform a skill that's neutrally buoyant over a reef? I think that's on us as training agencies to say yes or no, because we are certifying you to then go out into this environment. And if all we've done is pin you to the bottom on your knees and had you do skills and watched you kick around and said, oh, well, you got from point A to point B, at least this time you just silted out the bottom. I think that that's where we then say, as an agency, you're certified to go anywhere and dive. And that's where I think we have some responsibility in looking at the skill set required, the motory skill set that's required of the diver to be less impactful to the environment that they're in. So that's my soapbox for the day. I guess against many, but I do feel strongly about that. And so what if it takes a little bit longer, right? That's better for the environment. It's better for the diver. It's better all around. The only thing it's probably not better for is the bottom line of the profit, because you can't put as many people through as fast. But you're solving on the other end retention, because that person's going to have such more fun, such better time. And you're not only retaining the diver, but you're preserving the environment that divers want to go dive in. And there's benefits all around. So there's my soapbox. If you're listening, send the hate email to jay at thedivetable.com and I will read it. But I feel strongly about that. And I think that we need to be more upfront that diving is a learned skill that takes muscle and motor work. And we need to include that in our training of divers, not just a checkbox. Yeah, you had 30 pounds of lead on you and you sat on the bottom and you took your mask off. Whatever, right? That's not the motory skill that we're looking for in the environments that we're certifying divers to get out into.
Yeah, we're going to have to make an episode 4 where we read all this hate mail we're about to get.
Exactly.
Because I'm right there with you. I'm just going to repeat what you said in a less than nice way. So I'm ready to make some enemies, and I'll give my email out for all the hate mail afterwards. But when you talked about specifically the biomechanical movements of divers underwater with choosing a specific kick, like a frog kick over a flutter kick, and the direction of the water and the fin goes, and that does add up. That's a true thing for sure. I think the other emphasis that goes on without coming across as like a scuba diving know-it-all is going to be the proper weighting of it, right? So if you look at all these divers in the water, the biomechanical part of it being heads up is an issue, and then if they're heads up, that means their fins are down, and if their
Right.
fins are down, that's where the reef is. So how do we tackle this skill issue of divers getting into trim so that even if they are not using a non-silting kick, like let's say they still are using a flutter kick, how do we even minimize the impact of a flutter kick by getting them in the right body position? And this starts with any instructor can go out there and in their next class do this one thing that will have the greatest impact on their students as far as getting them into the proper position. And it is get off your knees from the bottom of the pool or the reef or wherever. Just don't do it. Like it. You talk about having a time frame of having your students having to push students through at a certain time, but you don't really need to impact that time frame by getting them to lie down on their stomach and taking 30 seconds, being like, okay, try and do this neutrally buoyant. Because even if you're in 3 feet of water and they crash into the bottom of the pool or they pop back up to the surface while trying to take a regulator out of their mouth or trying to clear a mask, you're setting the foundation for better skills and you're setting a foundation for good habits. So that's it. I'll take my hate mail. That's it. Just
Get off the bottom.
It's such a simple solution that I really do believe will go a long way.
Yeah.
Is even if you don't have the time to do the real hard work of getting your students neutrally buoyant, set them on the path that will help them build good habits.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, let's just imagine a world where we had the scuba police, which we don't want, but I'm just saying imagine a world. This is a good way to think about that as an instructor. Is let's just say that your student is one of the ones that of the 17% in Greg's study that broke the coral.
7%.
And there's a fine for that. And they go and look at the C card and say, well, who signed you off as you're ready to be in this environment? Oh, it's Greg Wolf. Greg gets the letter in the mail. Hey, your student so-and-so broke this coral and it equals this amount per year that coral was alive. You're now fined X amount of dollars. I guarantee you in Greg's next open water class, he's thinking about not getting that fine. Now, I'm not saying that's fair. And I'm not saying that that's the way it should be. That's definitely not the way it should be. But if you take that level of responsibility, because you are the certifying instructor, you are the one, not the agency, you are the one as the instructor that says, yes, this person's ready to go dive in 60 feet of water wherever they want to, because that's what that card says. Are they ready to be in a sensitive environment or any environment that they could break stuff? Or are you certifying them? I am certifying you to be able to go in 60 feet of water as long as you kneel on the bottom and don't swim? That's a good question, right?
Well, there is a liability to that. There is that potential for the fine, because if you look at the quality of the training for the diver that is causing these environmental impacts, think about how much more dangerous that type of diver is to themselves or to others from a safety standpoint about accidents.
Yeah.
So by taking shortcuts in your training, you're not only damaging the environment, but you're also setting yourself up to be sued in the future.
Yeah. And I'll absolve some instructors too, because a lot of instructors are taught to teach to the standards. So there is an aspect of, if the standards say this is what I teach to, or how I'm supposed to do it. And I get that. And a lot of instructors have said to me, I wish I could do it differently, but this is what the standards say. And I think the overarching thing is not to debate is it the agency or the instructor or the diver's fault? I would say there's culpability on all three, right? But it's more or less to say, as an instructor, if you know better, how do you prepare that student better? And yeah, it may be outside of the small amount of time that you have, but ultimately your name goes on their card and you're saying this diver's ready. And I think for me, at least as an instructor, I take that pretty seriously, because I think that I want to preserve the environments that are out there. And I think that I have a role to play in not only myself minimizing my negative impacts as a diver, but the students that I work with and that I certify also minimizing their negative impacts. And there's an exponential growth factor to that. That if we all just took that view, regardless of what the standards say, right? If we take that accountability, it helps a little bit. And I know that, I'm not trying to point fingers at instructors and call them, that they're causing all this, but I will say there's a different path. And I think that it's hard to step out on that path sometimes because it's outside of maybe what you were taught or outside of what the standards say. And my encouragement is, again, to look at kind of the bigger picture, which is, hey, we all want these sites to be there for at least the rest of our lifetimes so that we can go diving on them. And they won't if we continue to produce divers that crash into coral reefs and break them. The coral won't be there, grow back in our lifetime. And that's the hard part.
I disagree with you, Jay, about how there's no true culpability for someone. I don't think it's the student's fault, right? I think we can surely observe the student from any wrongdoing based on what they are going into the class to learn. But there has to be some level of responsibility that takes place. And that responsibility, if it's not going to be on the student, it has to be on either the instructor or the training agency. So the other question comes to be, who is letting who teach? And if the training agency is letting a specific instructor teach, where is the quality assurance in that instructor? And what is the message or the goal of the training agency when dealing with their instructors as far as teaching what the materials are and what the standards are? I don't think that can be something that's ignored.
Yeah.
So
well said. Yeah, we the hate mail is definitely coming.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm gonna get a letter, and I'm, as an instructor, I'm probably gonna get a letter and be like, "Oh, why'd you say that?"
Yeah. I'm lucky I won't get that letter because, but at the same time, I know I'll get all the emails